Welcome to another session of AVR120. Today we are going to be going over how to set up some footstep audio on the character. Just kind of warning, this is going to be a little bit more complicated with regards to the scripting aspect of it. I encourage you to kind of pause the video and review the code on the screen. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me as well. So the basic general premise of what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be basically shooting a ray cast from the main camera downward into the ground, and depending on what the ground is tagged as, we'll go ahead and press play a certain type of audio. So that's the general simple basic premise of it. The implementation is going to be a little complicated with the scripting. So let's dive right into it here. Go ahead and right click on the player and create an audio source on him. So we'll go to audio and then audio source on the player. And from here, let's go ahead and go onto that audio source object. We'll add a component and we'll add a script here, and we'll call this player audio controller. Go ahead and click into this here. And so the first thing we're going to go ahead and need to do is we're going to create some lists. So we'll use that serializable field option again there to basically keep the list private within the script, but then also visible within the editor. And we will go ahead and create a list. So we'll go lists and we'll create a list of audio clips and we'll call it sound clips. And we'll set that equal to new list audio clip with parentheses. And that will initialize our first list. And that is of type audio clip. So that list will take audio clips. This list will take strings, and we'll call this list tags. And we will set this equal to a new list of strings to initialize it. Okay, so we've declared and initialized two lists here. We're going to need a reference to the actual audio source that is on our object here. So we'll just do audio source and call this audio source, this variable name. Then we'll go ahead and reference we'll need a reference to the player movement script for this functionality as well. So we'll just go ahead and set that up. So I'm going to be accessing a variable of player movement type, data type. So that's the player movement script that we created. And the player, we've created that class, so we have that data type now, player movement, right? So it's the player movement a variable of type player movement, and we'll call it player move. And so this will allow us to reference that other script and access some variables which we'll need from that other script. The last thing we're going to go ahead and do is I'm actually going to put this underneath my lists, put a space here just to indicate it's different. And I'll go ahead and create what's called a dictionary. And then I'll write this out here. So basically a dictionary, all right, is similar to a list. You can almost think of it like two lists, all right? It holds two sets of data types. So in our case, we want to have it hold a string and an audio clip. And the way it works is instead of just having one like a list that has one set of data types, right? So like, that list element 0 could be one audio clip, 1 would be second audio clip, 2. This does the same thing, right? So this is like almost like a list of audio clips, but then it also has this list of another list that corresponds to these audio clips. So this essentially is the key value um, that will find the audio clips that it's associated with. So basically, we're using this string here to find the audio clip that we want. So in our case, we're gonna, get the tag of what we're standing on, all right, and then play the correct audio clip, all right, that's inside of this dictionary here. So we'll go ahead and initialize this now. We'll call this dictionary like ground sounds, and we'll initialize it to a new dictionary instance. So now that we have all that set up ready, last thing we'll need is a public string called floor tag, and that will hold the name of what we hit. Okay, so now that we have all that set up there, I'm just going to comment some of this out here as we go along. So these are the lists to hold audio clip and tags to use to populate the dictionary. So we'll go ahead and use the for loop here to loop through these lists to populate the dictionary. And we set it up this way. We'll say for int I equals 0, and that will be our indexer that we'll use to loop through. We'll say as long as I is less than, and the lists need to be the same length, right? Because the tags need to correspond to the clips. So we'll basically just take tags.count, all right? And we'll say as long as the indexer is less than the number of that list, so this list here, the length of that list, and we'll say we'll increment the indexer, and we'll go ahead and set up the code here to populate that. So we'll say if, we'll say we'll just go ahead and actually just access the ground sounds dictionary. We'll use the add method here, and we will take the tags and we will pass it in I, so that essentially in every loop it will add that. So on the 0 loop, it will add the 0 element from the tags list. On the first loop, it will add the first tag of that list to the dictionary. And then we're also going to go ahead and need to add the do that same thing for the sound clips. So we'll go to the sound clips, and it will we'll pass it I. And this way, basically, what's going to happen here is we'll go into each section of the ground sounds dictionary, and we will so in the 0 element, we'll add the 0 element from the tag and the 0 element from the sound clip. And then for the first element from the tags list, first element from the sound clips. And then in the dictionary, basically, it's going to say, okay, what's the 0 element of the tags list that we just got added? Okay, it's, desert ground. Okay, we need to find the desert ground audio clip. And so that is how the dictionary kind of works. Like, this is essentially a key to find this data type here. And you can kind of see that if you mouse over it. It says dictionary and then T key and T value. And then it says T key is a string and T value is an audio clip. Okay, so now that we've kind of set that up, let's go into update. And so what we're going to do is now we're going to set up our raycast logic. So let me actually, just before we do that, I'm just going to comment here so you have that in your code. I'm going to say populating dictionary using a for loop to loop through the list of strings in tags and the list of audio clips in sound clips. Then using the indexer I to access each element of those lists and adding them to the string key value and audio clip values of the dictionary. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and go into update, and we'll set up our raycast logic. So we're going to go create a raycast hit variable. Okay, we can just call this hit, and we're going to create a ray variable, and it's going to be called footstep ray, and we'll set it equal to a new. We'll create a ray here, and the ray method. Okay. It takes an origin and a direction, okay? Both vector 3s. So the origin will be the position of this object, which is on the player, because we want it to be from the player. And the direction is going to be down. So we'll go vector 3 dot down. Then we'll go ahead and do an if check and say if the physics.raycast, okay, and we will pass it the footstep ray, okay, because raycasts, it's going to take a origin point, all right, so our footstep ray is going to be our origin point, or it takes a ray, excuse me. One of the second overload of the ray physics.raycast takes a ray. So we're passing this footstep ray, and then it takes a mass distance. We're not going to do that. We don't need that. We actually want to return from this raycast method the hit variable we just created. So we'll use out, and it will return us the hit info. Essentially, it will return our hit variable that we just created, which is our raycast hits here. So this is a variable to store information about what our raycast hits. This is creating a ray from the player audio controller position and shooting it downward. And this is going to doing this if the ray hits something. And we'll say we'll use that floor tag variable that we have, which is a string, and we'll set that equal to, we need to access the hit variable. We need to access its collider, okay? And then we need to access, from that, we can access the game object, all right, that the collider is attached to. And then we can access the tag of that game object. So we're getting the tag of whatever the raycast is hitting, okay? Setting, or setting the tag of what we hit with our ray downward to our floor tag string variable. And then I'm going to put a debug.log. It's going to spam our console, and that's because it's going to run every frame. But just to test to make sure that it's working, we can, and to see that it's getting the proper tag, we can set this debug.log up here, and we'll just pass it floor tag. So this will tell us what if our raycast is working. Okay, so if we go back into the game now, so we'll need to go ahead and to get that to work, we're going to have to set the ground to a specific tag. So we'll go ahead and access the ground object. And if you haven't put your ground underneath like a top level object already, you're probably going to want to set it up similar to this. So just like have your ground underneath one object, and then have the smaller ground pieces like parented to this ground object here. So we'll go ahead and in the ground object, we'll go to tag, and we'll go to add tag, and I'm going to call this ground, or sorry, desert will be the tag. And I will set this to desert. And I'm going to rename this to desert ground. Okay, so we've set this tag up to desert, and but you'll notice that all the other objects didn't change. So it only changes the children object if it's a layer. And our layer is already set to ground, so we don't want to send it to, we also don't want to set it to like desert. So you could just select all of the objects and set it to ground, to desert here, like so. And that'll work just fine. But if I wanted to do this at runtime, I'm going to show you a script and a concept, which is kind of complicated, but is useful and would probably be useful for you later for other projects. So it's called a game tagger. It's called the game tagger script. So I will go ahead and create the new script. I'm going to call this game tagger. And we'll just need one reference or one variable. It's going to be a serializable field, so we can set it in the editor, and I'm going to call it tags, this type string. And so this is just going to be a function and start, and it's a little confusing. So this is a concept in programming called recursion. And recursion is essentially when a function calls itself and will basically call itself until a condition is no longer true. It's essentially how they did loops before loops were essentially created. It's in the early days of programming, they would use recursion and have functions essentially call themselves. So I don't completely expect you to like understand this completely, but it's it's a useful thing to kind of be aware of. So we're going to create a function in start called void add tag recursively. And this function will take a transform. So we'll use this to basically get the transform of game objects that we want to change the tags of, and we will give it also is going to take the tag that we want to go ahead and change these objects to. So we're going to get the transform of the game object, and we're going to get its tag, and we'll set that equal to the tag that we are passing in. All right. And we'll use an if check and say if the child count, so that is the number of children the parent transform has. So if we put this on our top level object, like a desert empty game object, all the desert planes that are parented to that object, or that are children of that object, all right, that's all of those. We'll set that as long as it's greater than 0. And you actually don't have to use these brackets all the time, and we're just not going to do that here because it kind of looks ugly. So you can say if, we say for, we'll do for each loop, for each transform. This is going to be our temporary variable t in trans. So the transforms that we're passing in, we're going to call this same method. We're going to call add tag recursively, and we are going to pass it the temporary t variable and the tag. And so what's going to happen here is, we need to actually call it initially as well. So we will, to start the recursive loop, so we'll go add tag recursively, we'll pass it the transform of the game object that this is on, and the tags, which we want to tag our game objects underneath this as. And so what's happening here is we will call it initially. It's going to pass it that top level transform, so the desert ground object that we have in Unity. Pass it the tags that we've written in the Unity editor as well. And then it's going to set the game objects transform to the tag that we pass in, okay, to this method. All right, so that tag there, right? Same as tags. So this corresponds to this parameter. And we'll set the game object to that tag, and then we'll say if that game object has children in it, essentially, for each of those children, okay, we are going to call this method again, and we're going to pass it in this tag, or the tag of its parent, excuse me. All right, so that's the desert ground tag, and we'll run it again. And so we'll run this, and it'll go through each child and tag it as what we want it to be, what we set the, essentially what we set this value to. So we'll save that. We'll go back into the editor here, and we'll see that these are not tagged as anything. And I'm going to tag this as, I'm going to set this as desert. And so the way this works is you're going to need to have this on every top level object, okay? So we'll go ahead and just to test this, just to make sure that these are going to get set at runtime, and we'll have the proper tags. We'll go ahead and run this. And you'll see here, if I open up the console, it's getting spammed. Basically, it's shooting rays from my camera downward, and I'm getting the tag of what I'm standing on. In this case, it's desert. And if we click on the desert objects underneath where our game tagger is, so we have desert ground set to tag, the desert tag, right? But our game objects are now also set to desert as well. Okay, so that's all working. So let's go back into the audio source controller script here. And you can see we don't have a reference to set up. We'll have to set those up, but let's finish up the script first, and then we'll go through and set it up. So now we're going to basically go ahead and do another if check inside of this if check. So we'll nest it inside of this if check. We'll say we're going to access our input class. We're going to access get button. And we're going to go ahead and access the vertical or forward access. And we're going to say we're going to access that, or we access the same thing, except on the horizontal now. All right. Sorry, and we are not jumping because we don't want, and we still have to do some setup to make the sound not go off while it's jumping, but we want to just initially have this condition in there. All right, so basically, this is how we'll play our sound. So if we are walking essentially forward or sideways, and we are not jumping, we will set the audio source's clip field, all right, to ground sounds and the floor tag. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take this floor tag here, all right, and if we're walking forward or sideways, we'll set the clip equal to the floor tag that we are getting from our raycast. And so what it will do is it will go into this dictionary, right? It will get the clip or the tag that we're getting from our raycast downward, and it will find the associated clip to that tag there. And so we're going to go ahead and we'll go ahead and create a coroutine now that will run the audio the way we want it to. So we'll go ahead and click IE numerator and audio play. And we will set this as audio source dot play. We'll just play the audio when it goes into this coroutine. And then, of course, we need to have the yield return null. But what we can actually do is we yield return, and we will instead use the wait for seconds, all right? And we can actually pass this the audio sources clip and length. So the length of the audio clip that we have in the audio source. So it will play the audio source and it'll wait till that clips over and then cease execution of this audio play coroutine. And remember, you need to have this outside of your update loop. Okay, so put it underneath update, but still inside the player controller class. And then what we'll go ahead and do is we'll say if the audio source is not currently playing, all right, so we can access audio source and the dot is playing field, which is the clip playing right now. So if it's not playing right now, then we want to start the coroutine to play the audio clip. So to start a coroutine, you need to use the start coroutine function, and then you need to pass in the audio play coroutine as well. And then we want to do the opposite check. So we'll say at the bottom of our nested if, so find the last piece there and make sure it links up with that input. We'll say else if our input dot get button up, okay, So returns true for the first frame the user releases the virtual button. Okay. So if our button up is vertical, or our input dot get button up is horizontal, and we don't need to do the jumping check for this one. We will stop the coroutine. Okay, so that will cease functionality of the coroutine. If we look at it, it says stops the first coroutine with the method name. So we'll go ahead and we'll stop it from playing the audio play coroutine, and we will also just make the audio source stop as well, just for good measure, and make sure that none of the audio that's associated with this script is playing. And so we're also going to just comment out this debug.log on line 48 because it's just going to spam our console. We don't want that. So we've done most of the coding here now. We just need to finish the setup to get this all to work. So we'll go ahead and in the class here, module section, you'll see these two sounds that we'll go ahead and need. So we'll go ahead and you'll want to download them. So if you click on them, you'll be able to download them. And those are the sounds we're going to have for each of the different areas that we're in. So I'll go ahead now and find these in my folder here. And we'll go ahead and go to the project, and under audio, I'll create another folder called footsteps. Go ahead and open that up here and add these two footsteps into it. And so now we only have one of the areas tagged, so we have the desert ground tagged, but let's go ahead and tag the secret base as well now. So we'll need to create a tag. We'll hit the plus tag here and say secret base. Go ahead and click the secret base again. Set that to secret base, and then we're going to go ahead and we need to move these scripts too, sorry. So we'll grab these two scripts out of the assets, move it into our scripts folder, open that up. In secret base, I'm just going to lock this up here, and I will go ahead and drag the game tagger script onto the secret base, and I will set the tag to secret base. And so that will now tag everything underneath this secret base as well. We'll go ahead now and go back to our player, unlock this, go to our player object and our audio source on the player, and we'll set up the audio. So you'll notice here that we have these two little kind of arrows next to the list name. So if we open these up, we can actually see we can add the list elements here. So we'll go ahead and add two elements, all right? And these will be the clips. So I'm gonna lock this in my inspector, and I'm just gonna go ahead and go into my assets, my audio, and my footstep clips. And I believe I want the first one to be the desert. So I think it's this little robot one. Yep. So I'll go ahead and drag this little robot into the first slot here, and then this metal footstep I'll drag into the second slot. Under the tags list, I'll go ahead and add two more tags, and they need to correspond exactly to what they were called in the hierarchy, right? So if you forget, just go to your desert ground here, unlock this, and just take a look at the tag. So the tag is desert for desert ground and secret base for the secret base. So I'll go back into the audio source in the player, and I will set this to desert with the exact spelling and secret base with the exact spelling as well. We also need a reference to the audio source. So I'm going to just drag this audio source onto that audio source slot. Okay. And So this will tell us what the floor tag is. We don't want to set this to anything really. We'll just leave it as is, but this will tell us like during runtime like what the floor tag is that it's finding. And then we haven't set this player movement reference up yet, but we'll go ahead and just drag the player movements on the player object. So I'll just drag the player object onto this, and you'll see that it's finding that player movement script. So we'll go ahead and save this now and press play. We'll see that the tag is updating correctly, and we can hear the footstep audio. So you might want to adjust the audio volume a little bit. You can do that via the audio source. Maybe just turn it down. It's not going to go ahead and update that in. It's not going to go ahead and update that when I stop playing the game. So just bear that in mind. You'll have to go back when the game's not playing and adjust that sound. Okay, and then going back to the demonstration here, if we open this up, we'll see that this works, that it plays the footstep sounds now too. Okay, so, and again, you can adjust this by just turning down this volume maybe a little bit here. Okay, now, one thing you'll notice is that when you jump, it keeps playing the sound effects. When you're in the bass and you jump, first off, the jump isn't working in the bass, and but if it was working, it would play the sound effects as well. So, reason most likely it's not working is because the bass is, yep, the bass is not set to the ground. So we'll click on bass and set it to ground and say yes to change all children. So now the jump will work in the bass. That solves that issue, but we've got to go ahead now and actually go um, into the audio controller and adjust, uh, get it to get the to not jump essentially, not play audio when it's jumping. So we'll click the audio controller, and we have a reference to our player move script. So, and if you remember, okay, in the player, I'm just going to open up the player move script here. Okay, we have a check to see if the player is grounded. So we can access that from this script. So we'll go ahead and we'll basically need to run the check inside of the coroutine. The reason is that this is going to be checking every frame, and we are playing the audio from this, so we need to have that check in here. So what I'll go ahead and do, and I will create an if statement, and I'll say if the player, if not player move, okay, um, sorry, it's if the player is grounded, okay, then we'll go ahead and play the audio. All right. Um, so this will basically go into here, and if the player is on the ground, it's going to play that audio there. So we'll go ahead and save this and press play. And we notice that it stops playing when you jump now. So it works fairly well. The last thing I want to do is fix an issue that I was running into as well, or noticing. Essentially, if you are on something that is untagged, you'll get some errors. So in order to fix that, we need to go into the code and adjust some things. So we'll go back in the audio source and go to the player audio controller, and it's really just this line of code here, line 58. We need to go ahead and check to basically run a check to make sure that the floor has some sort of tag. So if basically we'll say if floor tag is not equal to, and then the string untagged, because if we don't tag something or forget to tag something, it will just be untagged, will be the tag of that object. And so if we go ahead and do this now, this will fix the error for that, and you won't get an error in your code there. Okay, so that should do it for this session. If you have any other questions, let me know as always. Otherwise, see you in the next session and have a great rest of your day. Be aware that end of next week, everything will need to be submitted if you haven't done so. And we'll be handing in the first-person shooter, so just make sure that you have everything you need in this project. If you have zeros for any of the projects, it's going to really hurt your grade. So just make sure to submit all of that, and that you, at least if it's going to be submitted late and it doesn't have all the requirements, that's okay. At least you'll get some points. So just be sure to submit everything. And other than that, have a great rest of your day. We'll see you in the next session.